In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a quilt using just 2 fabrics and 1 simple quilt block. Now it's beginner friendly, quick to put together and perfect for a relaxing weekend project if you don't want anything too complicated. So let's get started. Now the first thing I'm going to do is cut some fabric. So for my dark blue fabric, I'm going to cut 8 strips of fabric that measure 5.5 inches by the width of the fabric. And I've trimmed the edge so that it's nice and straight. And now I just need to line up my ruler on the 5.5 inch mark and cut. And then I'll continue along until I have all 8 strips cut. Then I'll take each of these strips and open them out. And you don't have to do this next bit if you don't want to, but I like to press the crease out of each strip so that I don't have to worry about having to press it later. And once pressed, I'm just going to take one of the strips and lay it out on my mat. Now cut off the selvage edge first so that I have a nice clean edge. And then I'm going to line up my ruler on the 5.5 inch mark and I'm going to cut. And I'll continue like that all the way down the strip. Now you should get 7 squares from each strip and you want to have 56 in total. And I'll just set them aside for now. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing with my light blue fabric. So I'll cut 8 strips that measure 5.5 inches by the width of the fabric, and finally I will subcut them into 5.5 inch squares. So at this point I have 56 dark blue squares and 56 light blue squares. Now I'm going to take one of the light blue squares and I'll place it on my mat with the right side facing down, and then I'm going to draw a line diagonally along the square. I'm using a friction pen for this and I'll put a link in the description field for it, but you can use a fabric pen of your choice. And I'll repeat that with all of the light blue squares, and I've just chosen the light blue fabric over the dark blue because it's easier to see the line on the lighter fabric. So now I have them done, and I'm going to take my pile of dark blue squares and I'll take one of them and place it right side up on my mat. And then I'll take a light blue square and place it right side down on top of that square. And what I'll do is sew 1/4 inch along both sides of this line. I like to pin the squares together to hold them in place as I sew, but you can skip this step if you prefer. Now in order to speed this process up, you can chain piece. So you can run through all of the pieces sewing on one side, as you can see here. And then when the first side is done, you can turn all of it around and run through each of the pieces sewing along the other side. Then you just snip the threads between each piece. I use this nifty thread cutter. It works by using an old rotary blade, so it's a great way of using up rotary blades that are getting a little dull. So my squares are all sewn now, and I'm going to take one of them and line up my ruler along the diagonal line that I drew in the previous step and cut. And now when I open up the pieces, you can see that I now have 2 half square triangles. Now I'll go ahead and repeat that with all of the squares that I have here. So I've gone ahead and cut all of the pieces, and at this point I'm going to open the squares and press the seams towards the darker fabric, and I'll repeat that with all of the pieces that I have here. So all of my half square triangles are pressed, and at this point I'm going to trim each of these back to 5 inches. Now this is not my favourite job, but it has become so much easier using these block rulers. This is not an ad, as we have no affiliation with block, but I just love them. It was a bit of an investment because they're not particularly cheap, but well worth it in my opinion. The ruler has a groove and it butts up to the seam line, making it super simple to trim. Now if you don't have one of these, you can use a square ruler like this one, and we have a tutorial on how to do this in the description field below, so just look for that if you need help with this step. So I have my half square triangles trimmed back, and I'll just set them aside because I now need to cut a few more strips of fabric, and these will be cut from the dark blue fabric. And the strip width for these will be 5 inches, so I'll line up my ruler on that mark and cut, and I'll repeat that until I have 14 strips in total. Once cut, I will again press these to remove that fold line crease, And then I'm going to take one of the strips and trim the selvage off the edge. Then I'll go ahead and line up my ruler on the 5-inch line and cut, and I'll repeat that all the way down the strip. So I now have 8 squares of fabric. And I'll go ahead and repeat that for all of the remaining strips. And here is my big pile of squares ready to go. And now I'll bring in my half square triangles as I'm ready to sew these together into blocks. So I just need to take 2 of the squares and 2 of the half square triangles and lay them out like so. And now I'll just go ahead and sew the block together. So I will place this piece over this one and this one over this, and I'll sew each of them together with a 1/4 inch seam. So I have them sewn down, and I will just turn them over to show you how I press these, and you can see that I press them towards the dark blue square. Now I can go ahead and sew these 2 together to complete the block. So my block is complete, and I'll just show you the back so you can see the pressing for this, and you'll notice that I've pressed the centre seam over in this direction. Now you can press it the other way if you like. It doesn't really matter which direction you choose. The important thing is to be consistent and to press every block the same way. Now doing that will help the seams nest together nicely when you join the blocks, making it much easier to get those points and seams lined up neatly. So all of my blocks are done now, and I'm going to head over to my design floor to lay these out. So this is me laying out the quilt. Now it may look a little complicated at first, but it's actually quite straightforward. Simply place the first block as shown, then rotate the second block 180 degrees and continue alternating the blocks in this way all the way down the quilt. Now to sew it together, I will start from the bottom row, and I like to sew the blocks in pairs first and then sew them all together to form a row. And I'll repeat that with all the rows. So now my rows are complete, and if you want your seams to nest, I would suggest pressing the seams in alternating directions. So for the first row, all the seams that I just sewed are pressed in this direction, and for the second row they are pressed in the opposite direction, and so on all the way up the quilt. And now I can go ahead and sew all of the rows together to form the quilt top. And there you have it, our quilt top is done. Now if you've enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more quilt patterns like this one.